right. Good morning to all. We are happy to present to you today the second of our PhilArts webinar series, which is co-organized by the Faura Project Incorporated and the BA Philippine Arts Program of the University of the Philippines, Manila. So the BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage, and Arts Management Program is an undergraduate degree in the university, which originally had two tracks, no? Cultural Heritage and the other Arts Management. Ever since the latter was offered, though, what made our program unique is the vision that good art management can only be carried out well by art managers who is steeped in cultural heritage studies. No? So it is for this reason that the tracks have now been merged officially as reflected in the current name of the program. No? So we said earlier, no? The Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage, and Arts Management Program. So the Faura Project, on the other hand, was conceptualized initially as a campaign to establish Padre Faura Street in Ermita, Manila as heritage zone. By spotlighting historical sites and landmarks through the street, showcasing an established national park at one end and a renowned natural landmark at its opposite end, it advocated that it could inculcate in UP students and residents of Ermita alike a sense of pride of place. Although various streets intersect the 14-hectare area of the University of the Philippines Manila campus, Padre Faura is the street which is shared by students coming from all 7 colleges of the university and is the academic front or base for most of them in the first 2 years in college. So when the Faura Project was convened in 2011, some UP alumni friends, students, members of the faculty, as well as some non-UP friends collaborated to engage in heritage research and promotion and other activities supporting the cause. So using particular spaces in Ermita as a living museum with heritage buildings and streets as artifacts, the Faura Project aimed to magnify long overlooked issues across fields through various initiatives and week-long events held along the street that the campaign champions. So among the activities organized were heritage trail tours for targeted groups and the annual Faura Week or week-long events of intensive heritage campaign. So eventually it became evident that heritage research and promotion weren't enough for the campaign. The need to also engage in heritage conservation was apparent. No? So a number of the Faura Project initiated conservation projects, mostly on intangible cultural heritage along the targeted street and its environs, were also then carried out. No? Most notable would be the annual Flores de Mayo sa Faura Festival, which advocates the revival of traditional May festivals in Ermita along the street of Padre Faura. It is also an annual campaign for endemic or local flowers, which are abundant in the month of May, and for related greening and heritage projects. So another project which should be cited is the continuing park rehabilitation program of the Plaza de Nuestra Senora de Guia, fronting Ermita Church. No? So a campaign for green space and park heritage, which is a collaborative project with the Ermita Sangguniang Kabataan chairperson, Miss Marinel Completo, and the members of her council. No? So incidentally, Miss Completo is a student currently enrolled in our BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage, and Arts Management program. So she is actually here right now. No? So in the past 9 years that the Faura Project has come to existence, its activities can be classified according to its 3 main thrusts. This would be heritage promotion, heritage research, and heritage conservation. So what we have today has to do with its with the first of the 3 trusts which I mentioned. We have here heritage promotion. So other than that of promoting what Calle Faura and its environs has to offer, Calle Faura has always long been supportive of fellow street heritage sites. No? So we had last time well, our first activity for the webinar series was interesting because we had the rice terraces, a street.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
a,
yeah, yeah.
yes, no, yes, we had that last time. Not that's what we had last October, and now we are dealing with something as interesting as interesting as our first webinar series we have today. We have asked today Mr. Bernard Guerrero to share with us a street which has been declared no as a heritage site, no, a world heritage site. Yes, as that. So we have long been awaiting, because of the storm. No, we had we had to push it twice, but we are really happy that we're pushing with it today. You know, so without further ado, to properly introduce our guest today, can we call on again Charisse? Yes, okay.
Okay, so it is truly an exciting opportunity to be able to learn more about Calle Crisologo and its narratives. Okay, so again, without further ado, let's get to it. So let me introduce our speaker for today. Mr. Bernard Joseph Esposa Guerrero is a cultural worker based in Paway, Ilocos Norte. He has delivered several talks on tourism and cultural heritage management across the country and has served as a consultant to various local government units. He was an awardee of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts Competitive Grant Search in 2017 and is presently a National Museum of the Philippines Cultural Deputy. He is currently working on the nomination of three cultural sites in Region 1 for their possible inclusion as national monuments. He is also a contributor to Business Mirror and Asia Times. Again, let us all welcome Mr. Bernard Guerrero.
Ayan, thank you very much.
Yes.
Charisse, I'm not quite sure how to proceed with this, ano, pero I would be needing a screen share.
Oh, okay po. Ma'am, can you give him the permission?
Okay, I just have to uh,
You could
make
just make him
co-host.
co-host na lang po.
Make co-host. Okay, there you go. Okay, there you go.
Ayan, so host disabled sige, screen share. Okay. Um, Ma'am, would you be able to see yung presentation?
Yes, I see it perfectly. Yes.
Great, great. Okay. So once again, I'd like to give my sincere appreciation as well to the group, especially to Dr. Levy Labor, whom in actuality I've only met once before. So it's nice that kahit papano when she was looking for a person to talk about vegan, it was me whom she had in mind as first choice, I guess. So I guess it only proves that shared passion and shared interest really goes a long way, especially when it tries to collect people of the same background, of the same passion for things together. So today po, I'm not really from vegan. I have to make that clear from the beginning. But I've done works for vegan, especially for the promotion side. So vegan is something quite close to my heart, especially since as early as my childhood days, pumupunta na kami ng vegan parate kasi if I remember it right, yung kapatid ng nanay ko, meron siyang nililigawan dati sa vegan. So halos every weekend we would go there, and it's nice to see how vegan was before and how vegan is right now. Because if you look at it, vegan actually came through several stages. In the Spanish period, it was a booming trading town. Back in the American period until up to late 1990s or mid 1990s, it was a dead town. And much of my childhood memories would be coming from that period na talagang feeling ko mas interesado pang ang paway noon kaysa vegan eh. And then it reached to a point of a revival of some sort when it became a World Heritage Site finally in 1999. So I'll be fleshing out different stages in the history of Calle Crisologo and the entirety of vegan as a whole in my presentation. So I'd like to go on to the first slide. Let's first talk about vegan. I think that a discussion on Calle Crisologo merits a discussion on where it is. So we could properly situate yung kanyang narratives. So we could properly situate yung kanyang history, yung kanyang cultural context, and even yung mga memories ng mga tao. So Calle Crisologo nowadays is more or less synonymous to Vigan. When people talk about Vigan, ang una nilang image na naisip, it's Calle Crisologo. Ang una nilang tatanungin is, nakapunta ka na ba sa Calle Crisologo? So it even comes to a point where it seems that for many Filipino, Vigan is just Calle Crisologo. But then again, Vigan is much bigger than that in terms of scope. So let's first discuss Vigan. Vigan was first and foremost a settlement back in before the Spanish people arrived in the coast of Ilocos. It was already a thriving settlement of local Ilocanos. So when the grandson of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi entered northern Luzon through the Abra River, he actually found that particular settlement to be the most conducive area where he would put his outpost sa north. So that unnamed settlement later on became Villa Fernandina, which was supposed to honor the king of the prince of Spain at that time, Ferdinand. So Vigan is geographically just an island, sa totoo lang. It's situated on both banks of two rivers, the Mestizo River and the Guvantes River. So it's not an island on the sea, but it's an island in between two bodies of water. So, and as we all know, back in the Spanish colonial period, when we want to put a trading outpost, it should ideally be close to a body of water to facilitate easier transportation of goods. So Vigan was the most conducive because it's not so far from the sea, and at the same time, it's also not so far away from Abra, where most of the goods come from back then. So initially, it was called Villa Fernandina. Villa Fernandina was still a small community at the time. In fact, wala pang alcalde mayor, sa totoo lang. The fame of Vigan really kicked in when there was a transfer of the See of Nueva Segovia from Cagayan to present-day Ilocos. Paano ba nangyari yun? So during the early days of the Spanish colonial period, the Sea of the Nueva Segovia, which would more or less coincide with present-day northern Luzon, was in Lalo, Cagayan. And I guess perfect timing din yung talk natin because yung memories of the past is actually relevant by the recent experiences of Cagayan at the moment. Ano? The reason why the Sea of Nueva Segovia was transferred to Vigan was because of the incessant flooding in the Cagayan Basin. So ang Lalo parating nalulunod yan sa baha noon. Minsan abot pa ng second floor or even third floor at the time. So it had to be transferred to Vigan because Vigan kahit papano it didn't experience flooding kasi may dalawang river na kung saan easily nag-exit yung tubig. When that happened, the Villa Fernandina became Ciudad Fernandina. So finally it became a city. So the city was not just the capital of the Ilocos region, but at the same time, it was the focal point, the spiritual center of the Nueva Segovia area ng Luzon. So currently, it's still the capital of Ilocos Sur, although recently lang siya ulit naging city kasi it came from a history of being a city downgraded to becoming a town. And then I think it also became one of the yo-yo cities back in the early 2000, kung saan isa siya sa mga cities sa Pilipinas na naging city, tapos naging town, tapos naging city, tapos naging town na naman. And then finally, it became a city again by a very interesting basis. So ang nangyari dito is that for most of Vigan's history, it was actually downgraded as a town. But recently, the city government of Vigan appealed to the national government that be accorded with the title of a city. If you look at it, economically speaking, Vigan would not qualify at all sa current standards ng cityhood sa Pilipinas, which would entail revenues, population, and size. Kasi kung titignan mo ang Vigan, maliit talaga. If I were to compare, I think the size of Poway Lake in Poway would even be bigger than the size of the poblasyon ng Vigan ngayon. Ganun lang siya kaliit. Pero ang ginawang basis ng local government was to use yung royal decree that allowed the transfer of the See of Nueva Segovia to Vigan and to rename it Villa Fernandina to Ciudad Fernandina. So the decree, the royal decree coming from the King of Spain at the time actually stipulated that for as long as the cathedral stands in Vigan and for as long as you know, it's where the center of power is. It should be, it should remain as a city. So I think in the Philippines there are only two cities that were able to use that justification, na because of a historic royal decree. I think the first one is Cebu, and the second one would be Vigan. Now, recently, Vigan was, as I've mentioned, in post 1999, Vigan was coming in to another Renaissance period. So, and the best two titles that it read maybe would be yung pagiging UNESCO World Heritage Site niya in 1999. And in sometime in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, it was also awarded with the 7 new wonder city of the world. But if you'll ask me as a cultural worker, I think that the former actually has better merit than the last one. Kasi yung last one, alam naman natin, it's just through public voting. And considering how many voters there are in the Philippines, talagang siguradong may papasok dyan na Philippines. So the photo that I have is actually on display in Dresden at the moment. One of the most beautiful cities in Germany. And I'd like you to have, I'd like you to remember this picture. This is one of the earliest photos of Calle Crisologo sa totoo lang. So unmistakably, we can already see yung mga lumang bahay na bato. Just 1 second. Nakikita na natin yung mga lumang bahay na bato, nakikita natin yung mga bananas, nakikita natin yung difference ng roofing, may kugon, may yero, at meron na ring meron pa ring brick tiles. So I'd like you to remember this mental image because later on I'll be using this as my anchorage in debunking some of the myths ng Vigan, kung ano ba yung mga totoong nasa Calle Crisologo at ano yung hindi totoong nasa Calle Crisologo, historically speaking. So let's first discuss Vigan as a World Heritage Site. Vigan was actually one of the first sites in the Philippines na ginustong ni-nominate ng national government for possible inclusion as a World Heritage Site. It was actually first attempted in 1989. Why did I say attempted? Kasi it obviously failed. At this time, there were actually 3 old Spanish period towns ng Pilipinas na ni-nominate. It was Intramuros, Taal Town, and Vigan. But all of them were downright declined at face value sa procedure. Bakit? Kasi actually malaki yung learning experience dito eh. And much of the nuances ng Vigan and even Calle Crisologo came from this failure. Bakit? Paano bang nangyari dito? Kasi noong 1989, the branding that the Philippine government chose was to claim that Vigan is a nice or a well-preserved Spanish colonial period that is comparable to the grand cities of Latin America like Mexico City, Puebla, Cartagena, Havana of Cuba, etc. If you look at it, I think I'll be more than humble enough to say na no, Vigan is not of that rank. Because number 1, it's not big. Number 2, in terms of monument, I think mas malaki yung mga monuments na yon. So the track that they chose wasn't really the most sophisticated track. The nomination was reworked in 1999, and that time it successfully got into the list. Bakit? Kasi ang ginawa nila, they really focus on not the big words. They focus on what makes Vigan really special. And that was to see it not as in the league of big historic Spanish cities, but to see it in a perspective where it should be compared with other Southeast Asian multicultural trading towns or cities. So kung ganun yung perspektibo, talagang makikita natin na Vigan has a unique niche kasi it's the only planned Spanish period city that is well preserved until now sa Pilipinas. So doon pumasok yung Vigan sa listahan natin. Kasi kung tutuusin mo naman, I mean, aside from the Philippines, wala naman ng ibang country na kung saan nasakop din ng Kastila. So talagang it's uniquely Philippines and then it's uniquely Vigan in uniquely Philippines. So it was inscribed under 2 criteria, criteria 2 and criteria 4. Now, if you will look at the nomination of Vigan, it actually acknowledged more that it's more Chinese than Spanish, in fact. And I think this is also another point of discussion kasi lalo na sa tourism, lalo sa advertisement. When we talk about vegan, we highlight more its Hispanic heritage, but we seldom really talk about its Chinese heritage. When officially, vegan is more Chinese than Hispanic. I'll go on to that later on as I discuss Calle Crisologo more. In 2012, Vigan also bested in also bested in a competition, international competition of sino ba yung best managed World Heritage City. So this happened in 2012, and it beaten a lot of other World Heritage cities, especially those in Europe. Maraming mga Filipinos noon yung nagtataka, paano matatalo ang Paris? Paano matatalo ang Barcelona? Paano matatalo ang Rome, for example? Because it seems na mali din, may pagkakamali din yung appreciation ng marami sa atin when we look at grandness, when we look at uniqueness as grandness. But in fact, those two things should be treated separately. The good thing about Vigan is that while its monuments may not be in the best condition, such as those in Europe, the living traditions are still quite robust, which is something that Vigan really took pride in ever since. So, gagaya ng sabi ko kanina, Vigan's uniqueness comes from the fact that it stands out compared to other Southeast Asian trading towns. And interestingly, Dr. Labor, I hope you don't mind me going to a bigger context. If you look at the other World Heritage cities in Southeast Asia, actually may mga counterparts din sila ng Calle Crisologo. Go to Dhaka, there is what they call the Yongker Street, kung saan nandun yung karamihan ng mga old houses na magaganda, yung mga Peranakan houses. Pag pumunta ka naman sa Georgetown sa Penang, then you have Lebuchulia. It's the same thing, Peranakan houses, pero talagang yun yung finocus nilang parang it's the street to go in and to visit once you're in that city. Pagdating naman sa Macau, I have that in my first photo dito, yung maraming red windows. We have the Rua da Felicidade, which was well preserved then. Pagdating mo naman sa Hoi An, you have the Tran Phu Street, which actually is the same street na kung saan mo makikita yung kanilang famous Japanese bridge. So I think that if you look at it based on patterns, halos lahat ng heritage cities sa buong mundo, there would always be one street that they would try to highlight to tourists and even to cultural workers like us. So Vigan would be in this league. So let's go back to Vigan. Ano ba yung components ng Vigan? So Vigan has more than 300 historic houses. When we mean historic houses, these would be houses, and I think JP and Dr. Labor would know this. Heritage houses would mean that they are at least 50 years old and above, of which more than 150 of these houses are from the American period. I think this is where the first clarification would come in. Many people think that since these houses are big and these houses are bahay na bato na may kapis, many people would assume that they are Hispanic houses or Spanish period houses of that. But in reality, most of the houses in Vigan are actually from the American period kasi most of them have been built post 898 na. So kung pupunta ka doon, makikita mo naman above the doors or even in front of the houses, there would be some year inscription indicating kung kailan sila na built. Like the Siquia house along Calle Crisologo, which is different from the Siquia mansion, was I think built in 1927. The Casa Ferril was built in 1930, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. Pero it's in that period. Now, Vigan has one cathedral and it has a bell tower. Originally, the cathedral should have 2 bell towers. Dapat left and right yon. Pero because of lacking funds of that time, only the 1 bell tower was erected eventually. The city also enjoys three historic plazas, Plaza Encarnacion, Plaza Salcedo, and Plaza Burgos. The last two would be the more famous ones. Plaza Salcedo would be the central, the focal point of the poblasyon ng Vigan. Alam naman natin na parang na ang urban planning noon nung panahon ng mga Kastila, as provided by the laws of the Indies, is that the town should revolve around a central plaza. And the central plaza should be surrounded by the key civic monuments of the town, which includes the cathedral, the Ayuntamiento Municipal, or the City Hall, the Casa Real, or the Capitolio nowadays, the schools, and the Archbishop's Palace. So interestingly, historically, there's actually a gorier side of Plaza Salcedo rin, and that is dyan actually biniti, hinang si Gabriela Silang, along with the other revolutionaries nung panahon ng Castilla who joined the Basi Revolt. So aside from Plaza Salcedo, we also have Plaza Burgos, which I think sa totoo lang, if I recall my memories, mas naging intimate sa akin yung Plaza Burgos kaysa Plaza Salcedo. Kasi back in the 1990s, early 1990s, halos wala ka talagang makita din sa Plaza Salcedo. I mean, there is the monument, but that's it. What made Plaza Burgos more crowd drawer was the fact na nandun na yung empanadahan noon. So yung empanadahan, it seems that even before, talagang nandun na sa Plaza Burgos. And Plaza Burgos would be at the one end ng Calle Crisologo. So there are a lot of civic structures around the main plaza. One might be thinking, bakit ang Vigan walang fortification? Again, as an island town, it didn't need to, kasi the waters were already its fortification. So with all these monuments existing in Vigan, in reality, in the Philippines, I think it has more monuments than Intramuros has to offer. The single most unidentifiable exponent, or maybe I can even go as far as claiming as the most important part of Vigan, would have to be the Calle Crisologo. Not because it's just visually appealing, but historically and heritage-wise, marami ding istorya, marami ding naratibo na so, as I go on to discussing Calle Crisologo, we have to resolve this question. Is a Vigan truly? Ang sagot ko dito is that in the past, hindi. Bakit? Kasi kung tutuusin mo, maraming mga towns noon nung unang panahon na kagaya ng Vigan din. Maybe Paway was also like that most of the houses were bahay na bato. But the only difference is that among the towns in the Philippines, it appears that Vigan is one of the few na hindi masyadong na-touch ng bagyo, ng war, ng apoy, which unfortunately befell most colonial towns back in the past. So in the past, it's not so unique. Kasi many people would even claim that San Nicolas in Manila was also well preserved. It survived the war, but it did not survive modernization. Some cultural workers and cultural researchers would even say na mas maganda pa nga yung San Nicolas dati kung tutuusin mo. Pero ayun, it didn't stand the test of time. Vigan did. So if we were to ask, is it unique at present? Then dyan tayo papalo sa answer na yes, because it's practically the only intact, well-preserved, sizable Spanish colonial period planned town, not only in the Philippines, but for the rest of Asia. So it's also unique if you want to look at it culturally, kasi it's also at a crossroads. It's the merging point of cultural, of different cultural lines. We have the Ilocano line, which is the local flavor of Vigan. We have the larger Filipino culture, and then we have the influences of Mexican, Chinese, and Hispanic. So kung titignan mo, maraming mga bahay sa Vigan na kamukha pa rin ng picture na to, na medyo hindi siya tidy, but at least you know that it's living. People still inhabit in them, which I think is the most important part naman pag heritage yung pinag-usapan natin is it still making sense to the people of today? And highly, by this single picture alone, we know that it is. So now let's go to Calle Crisologo. Calle Crisologo was formerly known as Calle San Jose noong Spanish colonial period, earlier days. And then it became Escolta de Vigan. Nung panahon ng Amerikano, it became Washington Street. Tapos, later on, it became Calle Crisologo. Of all the name changes, I think that two names are the most important to note here. Number one is Escolta de Vigan. Escolta de Vigan because it bears an uncanny resemblance sa Escolta de Manila, kung saan it was also the business lane noon. So both of them enjoy the fact that they were the main avenues, the main thoroughfare, where most of the commerce, most of the business activities would usually take place. Now, pagdating naman ng Calle Crisologo, the biggest question that we have to ask, I guess, is sinong Crisologo ito? Kasi alam naman natin na political family ang Crisologo sa Ilocos Sur, but maybe most of us wouldn't know kung sino yung Crisologo na mini-mention dito. The one being mentioned here is Mena Crisologo. Mena Crisologo was one of the delegates and signatories ng Malolos Congress, and eventually he became the first governor ng Ilocos Sur. He is a politician, and at the same time, he is also a prolific poet and playwright. He's culturally, marami siyang sinulat na zarzuela and moro-moro. And in fact, he was the first Filipino to translate Don Quixote, the book Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes into Ilocano. So he's not just a political figure, but he's also a local literary figure. So when Vigan was reaching a point of a cultural renaissance, they decided that they have to honor the most important street to probably one of the most important persons in Vigan's history, and that is Governor Mena Crisologo. Now, Calle Crisologo is lined with several bahay na bato. Some are as old as 1700s. So they're not the oldest houses around, because I think that Cebu would claim that record. But the good thing about Vigan is that marami siyang old buildings. So the entire stretch of Calle Crisologo houses, if I'm not mistaken, 24 to 28 historic houses. Ayun, 24 pala, 24 ancestral houses plus 2 kamarin. Kamarin would be your warehouse, or nung unang panahon ginagamit ilang granaries for rice, tobacco, and other agricultural products. So it is the business district that is situated in the Kasanglayan area, or yung tinatawag naming Gremio de Kasanglayan, or the Chinese Mestizo district ng Vigan. Kasi sa ibang dako naman ng Vigan, on its western side, there is another business district doon. Yun yung Quezon Avenue. And the Quezon Avenue actually flourished nung American period na. So they had their own share of fame. Calle Crisologo was so famous back in the Spanish period. The other one became famous nung American period. And in more present time, it reverted back to Calle Crisologo na naman. So Calle Crisologo as a heritage space. As I mentioned a while ago, Calle Crisologo houses a lot of old shop houses. Yung mga bahay na bato na to have a unique nature, in a sense that you have to understand that it's a multicultural city. So yung mga bahay na to, hindi lang puro bahay lang. In fact, they are of mixed use. Yung sa baba, normally, it's where the stores are. Nandyan yung komersyo, nandyan yung imbakan ng mga bigas, mga palay, mga tabako. Sa taas naman, yun yung tinatawag natin na living space. Nandyan si Donya, nandyan si Don, nandun yung mga anak, yung mga heredera. There are two types of bahay na bato. One would be yung bahay na bato sa taas, kahoy, ay bato sa baba, kahoy sa taas. And yung isa naman is bahay na bato sa taas, bato din sa baba. But of course, there are different other permutations, pero generally yun yung dalawang classification ng houses na nag-exist sa Calle Crisologo. As I said a while ago, while Calle Crisologo was vibrant during the Spanish period, it fell to a phase of decline during the American period. Kasi nung pagpasok ng mga American period dito, medyo naagawan ng spotlight yung Calle Crisologo. It went to the other business street. So as I said kanina, I still experience the time na kung saan ang Calle Crisologo wasn't really that much known. Its importance wasn't that, and it even came to a point na there was even a proposal back in the 1970s, and it came out again in late 1980s na i-demolish na lang yung mga bahay na yon to pave way for or to progress. So ang mga kalaban ng Calle Crisologo at the time were these mentalities. Number one, sobrang luma na to. Number two, dahil luma, it's dangerous. So might as well gibahin na lang at maglagay ng mas safe na building. Kasi kung tutuusin mo naman, the safety doesn't only come from the strength of material. The safety also comes from the hazards that can come in pag may delubyo, pag may storm, pag may earthquake, etc. Another bad mentality that most Ilocanos would have, especially in Ilocos Sur, by the way, would be yung kanilang mga superstitious belief. Many of them think that having old things is also the cause for bad luck in the family. So merong pagka-backward thinking noon. And for those who are more enlightened, some people even saw the old houses as a colonial chain to the past. So many people would say na parang, ay tanggalin na yan kasi it reminds us of our colonial past. Gumawa na lang tayo ng panibagong building para pag-start afresh tayo. So all of these different mentalities were the cause kung bakit nag-fall into decline ang Calle Crisologo. Aside from the fact na economically speaking, nag-downgrade din siya. So during the Marcos administration, there was a revival attempt which was spearheaded by then the First Lady Imelda Marcos. Pero ang kanyang ginawa is quite lasting yung effect, but at the same time, it's something that the current administration in Vigan is trying to correct. And that was when they painted all the houses in Vigan white. The reason for this was because the First Lady thought na sobrang sabog yung color palette ng Vigan. Kasi yun nga, napabayaan, so maraming pintura ng natatanggal o hindi na buo, hindi na maganda, hindi na vibrant. So the solution that was proposed to her then was gawin na lang Ciudad Blanca or White City, which is an international movement then. In fact, kung titignan mo sa buong mundo, maraming historic cities ang Ciudad Blanca. Tel Aviv is a white city. Cuenca in Southern America is also a white city. So, I mean, in Greece, maraming white cities. And I guess they thought that Vigan would also be nice if they can make it into a Ciudad Blanca. So that's why they repainted it white. So, but if you look at it historically, Vigan is no different from many colonial period trading towns and trading ports in Latin America. It should have been highly colorful. Kasi kagaya ng istorya ng isang mentor ko, the late Ricardo Favis, who happened to be specialist sa UNESCO Asia Pacific sa Bangkok noon, ang kanyang sinabi is that Vigan were originally colored because again, it is a trading town. And what normally happened before was that the sailors, the merchants who owned ships, whatever paints are unused for their ships and boats, inuuwi nila yon at ginagamit na pinipintura sa kanilang mga bahay. So historically, it's also not so surprising to see a house na may tatlong kulay. Kasi kung baga, ang pintura mo is limited. It's just the excess paints. So, ganun yung nangyayari. Merong yung first floor color blue, yung second floor color yellow, mga ganun. So, it just really covers as to where the remaining paint can serve. So, if you look at it, kagaya ng picture na to, there are some efforts of owners of the houses to bring back the old colors. So nowadays, you can see peach, you can see yellow, you can see green, you can see blue, all in the pastel color shades. In fact, sa City Code ng Vigan, it has been a recommendation lahat ng mga bahay kung kaya, pwede nilang ibalik yung lumang pintura as long as it's only revolving in a select number of color schemes. So again, it's one of the attempts to revive yung historic past and glorious past ng Vigan, to bring back yung kanyang vibrant color. Because visually speaking, kung nakikita mo maganda yung lugar, it gives you a better sense of nostalgia. It gives you a better connection to its past na talagang it's one of the richest streets in the city at that time. So let's now go on to more stuff on Calle Crisologo. At the start of Calle Crisologo, sa unang dulo ng Calle Crisologo, you would find the monument dedicated to Leona Florentino. Leona Florentino was actually the foremost Ilocano poetess at the time. Even back then, she was already being published internationally. So there's no fitting person to have the honor to be placed sa dulo ng Calle Crisologo, which is a very much visited space sa Vigan than Leona Florentino. Yung monument na to, kung titignan natin, maraming nasasabi yung picture eh. Kung titignan nyo, nakaupo siya, may hawak siyang scroll, isa yan sa mga poems na gawa niya. On the side of the chair, you will notice the arpa Ilocana. Harp, as a musical instrument, is considered as the musical instrument that's closest to the Ilocano people. In fact, there was a study before in UP that actually revealed, I think this was in the 1970s, it actually revealed that most harp players in the Philippines and most harp makers in the Philippines are actually found in Ilocos Norte. Ranking number 1 would be Bacara, and my hometown Pawa is one of the top 10. So so the detail of placing an harp beside Leona Florentino is actually a nod to the culture of the Ilocanos na talagang mahilig kami sa arpa. Now, the son of Leona Florentino, who also resided in the first house of Calle Crisologo, was also a hero. Isabelo de los Reyes is the founder of the Philippine Labor Union. He was also a journalist. He was also a politician. So, powerhouse yung unang bahay dyan kasi dalawang Philippine heroes yung pinanganak at nabuhay doon. So, kung titignan natin, yung mga residential houses na to sa Vigan, although yung mga first floor nila naging shop houses na ulit, bilang souvenir shops and restaurants and hotels, most of the top floor or the second floor are still inhabited by the original or the present day owners. So residential pa rin yung kanyang function. If you will map the demography ng mga houses sa Vigan, ito siya. May isang grocery at the moment, may isang hotel, may isang funeral parlor, which is very interesting. I'll be talking about that much later on. May isang bar, may isang empanadahan, maraming souvenir shops and food service shops. Nandun yung office ng tourism office ng provincial government, and nandun din yung tourism office ng government. Now, what exactly were the traded commodities in Calle Crisologo back in the day? So dito natin titignan yung connection niya to other places as a melting pot of different cultures and traditions in the north. The most important traded commodities in Vigan during the Spanish colonial period, when the galleon trade was still robust, are number 1, beeswax, number 2, malatayum. Malatayum is a local plant which yields the color indigo. And indigo is one of the rarest colors back then. Kaya nga tinawag na dugong bughaw kasi talagang royal color na yung indigo color noon, or the color blue. And then obviously if you're from the north, you know that tobacco and garlic also play an important role sa trade namin and local commerce. And then we also have the inabel cloth. We have woodwork coming from San Vicente and Kawayan, and we have tambourine coming from Bantay. Then we have pottery coming from the district or barangay ng Vigan. So, ano ba yung use ng beeswax dati? Yung unang dalawa na commodities dito are actually coming from Abra, Highland. Beeswax was so important because ang rami niyang uses at the time. It was used for industrial machines, for lubrication, it was used for medicine, it was used for food preservation, it was used as emollient for many uses. Yung dyes naman ginagamit yan for cloth, and it ties well with the inabel cloth na traded commodity because you need them to color the textiles. The tobacco naman, as you well know, the history of Ilocos is synonymous with the history of tobacco in the Philippines. We were basically yung ginawa nilang yun yung specialized agricultural product namin together with garlic. Yung woodwork, it's still being displayed doon until now sa mga souvenir shops. Tambourines are also being displayed there as well as pottery. So another aspect of Calle Crisologo would be nice to look at would be its cultural and heritage composition. As I said a while ago, Calle Crisologo is in the Kasanglayan district, or in the Mestizo district as we would like to call it now. When we talk about Sanglay, the first thing that comes to mind would be Chinese. And true enough, there were a lot of Chinese in Vigan. You can actually see this sa family names pa lang nila. In the family nomenclature of the old families in Vigan, makikita natin na karamihan doon starts with letter F. Feril, Favis, Florentin, tapos meron pang Florentino, tapos meron pang Fez, etc. So maraming letter F. That is because in the edict of Governor Narciso de Claveria, ang kanyang inassigned na family name sa Vigan specifically would be mostly letter F. And one other place, interestingly, that I've been to sa buong Pilipinas, that more or less was able to keep yung letra ng karamihan ng family doon is yung island ng Banton sa Romblon. I was lucky to have been there back in 2014, and I was so surprised na karamihan ng family names doon is letter F. So much so na kung titignan mo yung mga markers sa paaralan, yung mga listaan ng mga naging hari, naging reyna, mga donors, ganun-ganun, halos letter F lahat. So Vigan also was like that back in the day. Karamihan ng families sa Calle Crisologo and even in the rest of Vigan would start in letter F for those who change their local names into Hispanic names. Yung iba naman, yung mga ayaw tanggapin yung surnames na binigay sa kanila, they actually had another option. And that was to make a Chinese reformulation ng kanilang mga pangalan. And dito, lumalabas yung mga pangalang Singson, Kokson, Tiongson, etc. If you hear a family name na nag-e-end ng son, more or less Chinese yan. Bakit? Ano bang nangyari? Kasi ang ginawa ng mga Chinese noon, and it seems that they had the political leverage to clamor for this approach instead, was to fuse the two family names ng mother and the father. So for example, the name Sikia. Sikia sounds Hispanic these days. And kung titignan mo, ang notion natin sa Sikia is that, old rich yan, na talagang mestizo yung kanilang mga ninuno. Pero kung titignan mo, it's a fusion of the family Si and the family Kia. They fused it together, it became Sikia. Ganon din yung family Singson. It was the family Sing and then the family Son. They fused it together, it became Singson. So the other exponent ng Chinese background ng Vigan is also manifested in several built heritage. One of which can be found sa cathedral. Kung titignan mo yung facade ng cathedral, merong 4 na Chinese food dogs doon. Food dogs would be your lucky charm sa Chinese belief. And if you look at the Archbishop's Palace, nandun din yung 2 Chinese food dogs na dati-rati ay nasa harapan ng Escuela de los Niños, which is the location of the present-day Jollibee and McDonald's and Chowking. Nilipat siya doon nung giniba na yung old building doon at nilagay na lang sa harapan ng Archbishop's Palace. So there's no better place where you could tangibly see the multicultural spirit of Vigan sa 2 monuments na to. Isang church pero adorned with oriental motifs, the Chinese food dogs. And as for the Archbishop's Palace naman, it's a big mansion sa totoo lang. Bahay na bato, may Spanish touches siya. And then you have the Chinese food dogs again. So I got this ad mula sa Bahay Chinoy sa Intramuros, and it actually explains to you yung sinasabi ko kanina na most family names in Vigan would have the letter F as the first letter ng kanilang family name. So Calle Crisologo has always been the usual thoroughfare, even back in the day. So it's a meeting place for locals, and nowadays it's a meeting place for tourists. It's a social space. Noong unang panahon, diyan dumadaan yung ating mga procession, religious processions. Diyan dumadaan yung mga parade, other social events. Kaya kung tutuusin mo din, if you look at the features of vegan houses, there is what we call ventanillas. The ventanillas are small openings at the bottom of the big capiz windows na kung saan meron siyang grill. The grill could either be wood or it could be iron. And many people would say na parang yung grill was not only meant for air to get in, but it also was used for protection sa mga anak. Kasi anong ginagawa nila noon? Ang ginagawa nila pag may parada at may prosesyon na nangyayari sa Calle Crisologo, they no longer need to carry their babies or children on the sill, on the window sill, kasi that's dangerous. Rather, what they would just do is that they will just open the ventanillas and the grill would be there to safeguard the kids from falling over. So nagdo-double purpose siya as a big crib para makita nila kung anong nangyayari sa kalye. So beyond what is obvious, there are also other telling narratives in vegan na gusto kong i-share na sa sobrang papunta-punta ako doon parate, nakita ko na to. Number one would be the phenomenon of crying ladies. Yes, nag-exist pa rin yan. Number two would be the tradition of making and using ex-votos or yung ating mga charms. And lastly would be yung pag-practice ng pagbasa ng oraculos or the old Philippine zodiac or horoscope. So itong mga to, I was fortunate enough to have seen yung mga yan. So yung crying ladies, wala akong photo ng crying ladies of vegan, so I just copied this movie ad ni Sharon Cuneta noon. So ang nangyayari dito is that dun sa funeraria na binanggit ko kanina, the funeraria Bakiran, there was a time that I was walking along Calle Crisologo and I heard people crying. So for some reason, I did not even read that it was a funeral parlor. So knowing me, knowing the curious me, pumasok na lang ako. And I was shocked with what I saw kasi yung mga babaeng umiiyak, nakadamit sila ng puti. And if I'm not mistaken, they even had the red cord on their neck, something like that. So it was something new to me because I've never seen that, at least in Ilocos Norte, that people were really crying and they were in costume. So when I asked our relatives in Ilocos Sur what those were, they said that most of big Chinese families still practice the crying ladies. Yung talagang magrerenta ka talaga ng pwedeng iiyak sa wake ng kamag-anak mo. So that's still highly practiced doon, at least until 2000. When did I see that? I think that was in 2012. So yung second photo naman na gusto kong tignan natin would be yung nasa right, left. Left natin, kung tama yung orientation ko. Yan yung may parang anting-anting na kamay, mga paa. Sometimes there are also other body parts like the nose, the ears, the mouth, the tongue, and even the eyes. What exactly is the point of this one? As I said earlier on a while ago, people in Ilocos Sur are more superstitious than us in the north. And I don't say that with judgment. I say that with pride in a sense. Kasi kung titignan mo, that's culture. And for us na cultural workers, that's something that we highly prized. Just hang on po Ayan, okay. So ano ang gamit ng mga ex-votos na to? They call them ex-votos. So ginagamit to ng mga matatanda if they want to pray for quick healing. So ang ginagawa nila, kung masakit ang kanilang mga kamay, they would pin one of these anting-anting sa kanilang mga santo sa bahay. So kung masakit ang mata mo, get an eye anting-anting, idikit mo sa damit ni Mama Mary, and that's how the tradition goes. And even up to now, some people still do that. When it comes to the oraculo naman, I have a friend who happens to be the daughter of the former mayor ng Vigan, si Mayor Singson Medina. Sinabi niya sa akin na nung kinasal sila, they were so traditional in a sense that they even consulted an elderly to go through the oraculos, to go through the old horoscopes, to go through the old zodiacs, to determine kailan yung best day na pwede silang ikasal at kung anong oras pwede silang ikasal. So sinabi niya sa akin is that the selection of the time and the day was highly based on an old tradition that is carried out in Vigan, especially by the Chinese community. So even until now, marami pa rin people na nagsusubscribe dyan. So one of the other stories in Vigan then would be yung romantic side ng preservation ng Vigan. There is this story that says na Vigan was actually spared out of a love affair between a Japanese and a local girl. The story goes like this, na nung before the war, there is a Japanese that was stationed in northern Philippines na nag-reside sa Vigan. Na in love siya sa isang local, kasi alam mo naman ang mga Ilocana, magaganda, obviously ano, pag kinitignan mo ako, charot, na in love sa Ilocana, and nagkaroon sila ng dalawang anak. And when the time comes that the Japanese soldier had to engage in the war, what he did was to look to the local priest to ask them to take care of his family. And the exchange was that he will make sure that once they attack northern Luzon, Vigan will not be in the target map. So kumbaga, he would present a map where Vigan is not represented at all. And they said that Vigan was so lucky that it never really got targeted during the war. So many people say na parang what we have in Vigan right now is thanks to the love affair ng dalawang taong to. If you will look at the UNESCO feature ng Vigan sa YouTube, I have here the link. It is actually entitled The Love That Saved a Town, the historic town of Vigan. It actually retells this romantic narrative. And I guess for film aficionados out there, just like JP, we might as well be reminded that in 2013, there was also a movie entitled Iliw, nandyan si Kay Abad, na kung saan reenact din nila yung love story na ito. So, aside from Calle Crisologo as a heritage site that's very dear to the locals, Calle Crisologo is also very dear to another set of people, and those would be the dayo or the tourists. So, kung titignan mo, there are a lot of things na magandang pag-usapan sa anggulong ito, Calle Crisologo as a tourist site. Because it seems that over the years, there have been a lot of misinformation happening in Calle Crisologo as well. Number one, when people talk about Vigan as a whole, they usually say that it's a Spanish town. Well, for us in the culture and arts scene circle, we know that it's not Spanish, it's not so much Spanish at all. Kasi if you look at it, as I said a while ago, it's actually more Chinese. If you take one house out in Vigan and place it in China, I think it would blend in well. But if you take a Vigan house and put it in Spain, I think that the difference will be very striking. Nakikita din agad yung diferensya. Sizes pa lang and orientation. Kasi ang mga bahay sa Europe, pataas yung mga yan. Habang yung mga bahay sa Vigan, it's pahaba. So it's more on the vertical dimension, which is reminiscent to Chinese houses then, na sa vertical dimension sila. Now, many people would like to call Calle Crisologo as the heritage village. This is actually a relic conception from the time of Ramos. It was actually something, it was the brainchild of one of my earlier mentors sa tourism, Dr. Mina Gabor, who happened to be the Secretary of Tourism nung panahon ni Ramos. Kasi ang balak nila noon, nung early 1990s, was to, as part of their initiative to revive Vigan, was to rebrand Vigan as a heritage village. Something akin to an entertainment park, something akin to, an amusement park, kumbaga. So, hindi natuloy yung planong iyon kasi even the locals actually opposed the idea. Kasi the idea was, okay, painted white yung mga buildings, papayagan na pumasok yung mga tao sa mga private homes, and i-require nila na pag daytime, yung mga locals kailangan nilang manamit ng Barot Saya at Barong Tagalog. And, visually it might have been nice, but then again, that would have been was a museum. But Vigan is not a museum. It's a living space. People still go around doing their daily lives. Naliligo pa rin sila doon. Minsan nga baka gusto nilang nakahubad lang sila sa kanilang mga kwarto. And if you let people in, that's an intrusion to their privacy. So many people were actually against that idea. But even if the idea didn't fly or didn't materialize, the branding stuck to the head of many people, especially to a lot of tour guides coming from Manila. Pag pinabang turista sa Calle Crisologo, anong una nilang sasabihin? Welcome to the Heritage Village. Ang unang sinabi sa akin noon ni Ricardo Fabis, who happened to be my mentor and work in UNESCO, told me that it's a misrepresentation to call it a heritage village. Because number one, Vigan was never a village at all. It's a town, it's a city. So for you to downgrade it even more to a village is injustice. So kaya sinasabi niya, sana itigil na yang heritage village na yan. That's a point of view coming from an expert and from a local. As I said a while ago, many people would like to claim it as the Spain of the Philippines. And I guess many people who do these claims are actually people who've never been to Spain themselves. The proper way to actually describe the houses in Vigan is that these are bahay na bato built during the Spanish time. Kasi kung titignan mo, yung mga bahay na bato, it's actually Filipino eh. It's not even Spanish. Kasi as Professor Chalcita explained in many of his lectures and in some of his books, he said that the bahay na bato actually came from the bahay kubo, of which naging concrete lang, naging bato lang. So it's still the same. Ang bahay kubo sa baba, that's usually where you put your grains, your tobaccos, your poultry, your pigs, your livestock. Sa taas, nandyan yung living space. Ganun pa rin yung orientation ng mga vegan houses nung panahon ng Kastila. Yung baba, it's tambakan, it's the warehouse. Sa taas naman, it's the living space. You have big windows to let ventilation get in. Vegans have big windows as well. So a lot of the features ng bahay kubo is actually assumed sa mga bahay na bato. Now, kung titignan din natin in popular culture, vegan, although as I said, it's not really Hispanic, it's actually more Chinese, was also used for movies, one of which would be the Born on the 1st of July remake ni Matt Damon, kung saan ginamit ni Crisologo as the scene for a Mexico part ng movie. Kaya kung titignan mo, if you walk along Calle Crisologo, there is this house which has the logo of the PRI, Partido Revolucionario Institucional, or one of the leading political parties in Mexico at the time. So it's nice to see this because it has so many connections. It just doesn't speak of the fact na nagamit yung Calle as a site for Mexico in a movie, but it also reminds us of the bigger past that vegan once had with Mexico, for example, during the galleon trade. Kasi malamang, the Philippines and Mexico enjoyed a very, very friendly relationship back in the day when they were trading goods. And vegan, as a trading outpost, enjoyed quite a lot from this exchange. So it's nice to see it from a tourist perspective, but at the same time, it's also nice to acknowledge that that logo is a representative of a deeper historical tie and historical root that vegan has with the outside world. Next, the World Heritage Site of Vigan. I think Dr. Labor did this mistake a while ago when she said that, I'm not quite sure ma'am, pero ang sabi kasi ni Dr. Labor kanina is that the World Heritage Site of Calle Crisologo as a World Heritage Site. And actually, many people think that it's actually the inscribed World Heritage property. But in reality, it's the whole Vigan. Many people would think that it's the only World Heritage Site, especially since lahat ng karamihan ng mga turista, especially those in field trip, ang pinupuntahan lang nila is Calle Crisologo. They don't go to the church, they don't go to the plaza, they don't explore the other streets. So the exposure that they have is only on that single street. So malamang when they go back home, the recall would be, I've been to Calle Crisologo, I've been to the Heritage Village, I've been to the World Heritage Site. But the World Heritage Site is much bigger than that street alone. So, ayun. Another thing that we would like to look at in Calle Crisologo as a tourist space is how they transform the vegan houses. So as I said a while ago, while it's true that they were built and used as commercial buildings, back in the day, iba yung trade. Ang trade ay cloth, woodwork, textiles, dyes, beeswax, tobacco, etc. Ngayon naman, wala na halos yung mga ganong goods. Ang goods na nakikita mo would be, as suggested in this photo, would be karamihan, mga t-shirts, mga souvenirs, etc. One of the things that I've also noticed when we talk about tourism in Vigan is how effective they were in branding things that are vegan. What do I mean by that? It seems that for many tourists, especially those coming from outside of Region 1, the appeal of having vegan in the name of a food is so enticing that it becomes a premium food. But in reality, it's just the same. What exactly am I trying to say here? Kung pupunta ka sa vegan, marami nang nagsasabing vegan longganisa, vegan bagnet, vegan, even vegan dirty ice cream, for crying out loud. How unique can a vegan dirty ice cream be? So it's part of the branding, and I guess for tourism, understand that things like those can happen. But in reality, your vegan longganisa is no different from the vegan that's being made in Paway or in Batak or in Lawag, for example. The formal name of the vegan really is actually Ilocos longganisa. Pero again, for branding purposes, they call it vegan longganisa kasi mas maganda yung recall. Mas maganda yung prestige na it's attached to an old town. So, kung titignan mo, yung mga bahay ngayon sa Calle Crisologo, almost more than 80% of those houses are actually souvenir shops na yung kanilang baba. Is that a good thing? It's okay kasi it's in consonant to the historic past na commercial space. But sometimes visually medyo nakaka-distract kasi it comes to a point that you could no longer even see the first floor of the houses kasi sobrang ang raming mga bagay-bagay na yung nakadikit. Like the one in the photo, you could hardly see that it's even a wall kasi punong-puno na siya ng mga damit na nakasampay. So at the tourist site, I'd also like to mention how the kalesas are actually pivotal then in making the Calle Crisologo that we know today. Again, I've seen Calle Crisologo at a time na nasa downward decline siya. At that time, di ko nga maalala noon kung may mga kalesas. Kasi otherwise, dapat sumasakay kami. Pero I don't know of riding in a kalesa. So it came to a point that even the kalesas, the tradition of kalesas were dying. It was dying. So one of the good effects of the renaissance ng vegan na sinasabi ko is the revival of the kalesas as well. If vegan didn't become a tourist site, if vegan didn't become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which propelled tourism later on, I guess kalesas would otherwise have been dead a long time ago. So it's one of the few good things ng tourism. It can revive traditions. It can revive old dying culture. Now, if you look at the second photo, this is more or less your typical evening in Vigan. Although obviously it's Christmas time kasi may parol, no? But this would be your typical evening scene in Vigan before the pandemic. And hopefully ganyan siya ulit after the pandemic. So it's a lot of people. While it's good for economy, there's another angle in looking at it. And that is how it is in the eyes of the locals. In the study of Bernie Macarelliano, who is a professor in UPLB right now, much of the people in interview niya who are residing in Calle Crisologo are actually irritated by mass tourism na noon. At least that was in 2019. Kasi sabi nila, they're becoming a pest, quote-unquote, a nuance, so much so na they can no longer proceed with their normal lives. Why? Because as early as 4 a.m., as early as 5 a.m., marami ng mga nagsisigawan ng mga turista doon. Nagtatake ng selfie, nagpa-flash, not forgetting the fact that people are still living on the second floors and people are still probably sleeping. So kung ikaw nga naman, nakahiga ka doon and alam mo naman ang Capiz windows, you can see a small flick of light, talagang mapapansin mo yan kasi transparent siya, halos hindi siya opaque. talagang namang magigising ka kung may mga maririnig kang sigawan na parang, hi, dito pa, shoot dito, shoot dyan, whatever. And then flash dito, flash dyan. So many people say na parang, sana merong magandang control on when people can actually step in sa Calle Crisologo so as not to disturb their private time. But also another thing that many locals don't like as an effect of mass tourism is yung encroaching of their spaces. Like before, they can just go down to walk if they want to walk. Nowadays, medyo magdadalawang isip na sila kasi sobrang raming tao na. So it seems that for them, yung locals is naagawan na rin ng kanilang mga spaces. So these are the things that are nice to look at when we want to assess Calle Crisologo, not just as a heritage site, but also as a tourist site. Kasi if you look at it all over the world, there are a lot of cities clamoring already against mass tourism. One of the first ones were Venice. And I was in Venice back in 2019, and there were actually a lot of posters saying na respect Venice, mga ganyan. Just to put the tourists in their proper places, not to misbehave, not to be overwhelmingly present doon, etc. Same thing happened in Kyoto. Many people in Kyoto said na parang hindi na daw nila kayang pumunta sa market freely. Kasi yung market, it's overwhelmed by tourists who, by the way, don't buy fish. So kumbaga nandun lang sila para mag-take ng photo. Habang yung mga taong bibili dapat ng fish, sila yung naghihintay sa labas kasi hindi sila makapasok kasi punong-puno na yung market. So these are examples of complaints that I guess even Vigan can relate to. Now, one of the good things again, when it comes to this renaissance ng Vigan is how they're transforming old houses into fully functional, aesthetically pleasant houses again. The first photo would show you how the current houses are in Vigan. Maraming plasters yung natatanggal, yung mga doors, minsan hindi na yung mga original doors. Largely, marami pa rin napapabaya ang buildings sa Vigan. But by and by, slowly, we can see that as people realize the potential of Vigan as a tourism space, many are more encouraged to actually develop them for other uses. Such as the one photo yung second photo na nasa slide ko, you can see that many people are actually incentivized to renovate them so that it becomes more attractive, and hopefully someone can rent it out as a museum, as a bed and breakfast, as a hotel, as a restaurant, etc. So at least that's one thing that's good. We see that with tourism, heritage is actually given a forefront space na naman. And it's actually acting as a catalyst for revival. So originally, although not originally, pero initially, Solo called Street in Vigan. This is where I'd like to debunk one myth. Kasi even sa nomination ng Vigan as UNESCO site, it seems that they were bold enough to claim that Vigan had historic cobblestone streets. In reality, walang cobblestone streets sa Vigan. As with most cities in the Philippines, walang cobbled streets noon. Intramuros was not cobbled. The only cobbled space in Manila was Binondo, at least from my conversation with Dr. Lico. And Vigan was no different. There were no cobbled streets, cobblestone streets in Vigan at all. I remember Calle Crisologo was just a normal street. Back in the day, kagaya ng first photo na pinakita ko kanina, yung black and white, that's Calle Crisologo. And I guess that photo was taken early 1920s. Makikita natin na it's a dirt road. Hindi siya sementado, walang cobbling. So when exactly did the cobbling take place? The cobbling take place during the time of Ramos in 1993. Preparation for its re-nomination as a UNESCO site. They thought that kung may cobblestone siya, mas ma-enhance yung kanyang visual appeal. That's what they did. And cobbling is not so bad in reality. Kasi kung tutuusin mo, sa lahat ng old towns, even those in Europe, wala naman talagang original na cobblestones na doon eh. Those are all recreated. So when Vigan as a city wanted to cobble the adjoining streets beside Calle Crisologo, like Plaridel Street and Rizal Street, if I'm not mistaken, maraming nagsabi na parang, uy, bakit niyo i-cobble? Hindi naman original cobblestones yan. Dapat Calle Crisologo lang. But little did they know that even Calle Crisologo was not originally a cobblestone street. But to raise the argumentation deeper, I, as a cultural worker, and many other experts would agree na there's nothing wrong in cobbling it kasi it doesn't alter anything. Kasi kung titignan mo naman, it's also in consonant with the spirit of the place. The locals wanted it, so bakit mo papayagan? It's the stakeholders who decide what to do with the space. And kung titignan mo, mali din yung comparison nila na parang, ay, gaya-gaya to sa Europe na cobblestone, gaya-gaya to sa ibang historic cities na cobbled din. But as I said a while ago, mali din yung comparison na yon kasi much of the cobblestone streets na nakikita natin ngayon sa mga posters, sa mga movies, sa Europa, actually ginawa din lang yan recently, all for the purpose of aesthetic appeal. So I pose here a question, is the cobbling good? It's good, but at the same time, it doesn't undervalue vegan kung wala siya. So kumbaga, it's just an added value na lang siya to enhance the aesthetic beauty of the place. So right now, if you go back to Vigan, the whole of Plaza Salcedo is, yung street around Plaza Salcedo is already cobbled. The two other streets flanking Calle Crisologo are also cobbled na. So it's actually good in a way that it would diffuse the tourist concentration in Calle Crisologo. That was also one of the main goals. Na malamang pumupunta lang sila sa Calle Crisologo kasi siya yung pinaka-picturesque na street. Kasi maganda yung bahay, maganda din yung kalye. Pero kung gagawa ka pa ng mga ibang kalye na ganun din, then that would plant the seed to the people na pwede din silang magkaroon ng selfie sa kabilang kalye din. So the carrying capacity of Calle Crisologo is at least nalilift ng konti yung burden niya. So I'm now down to the last part of my presentation, which is to discuss yung mga piling notable houses along Calle Crisologo. So the first house here is the Leona Florentino house, which was built in 1797. So it's one of the oldest houses in Vigan. So it was originally owned by the Pichay family, and then it was bought by the family of Leona Florentino. So as I said a while ago, dalawang heroes yung nabuhay dyan, Leona Florentino and Isabella de los Reyes. The one of the two granaries or Kenya, and it was described sa book ni Dr. Shalsita as one of the best granaries in the Philippines kasi maganda daw yung kanyang architectural attributes. However, kung nakikita niyo yung plaque, so I'm not sure if you can see it. I'm trying to point it with my pointers. May plaque siya doon placed by the city government of Vigan, of which parati kong kinokorek every time na may dinadala akong mga kaibigan doon. Kasi the plaque wrongly described the building as an Art Deco building. So even my friends from the NHCP agreed na mislabeling yon. It described as an Art Deco building, but clearly it's art. So yan sa mga kumbaga misconceptions ng maraming tao, and I hope that no tour guide would take the plaque seriously as describing that this granary is an Art Deco granary, because it's not. Next would be the Isabella Florentino house. So it's this house kung nasaan yung island souvenir shops. So it's a classic example of a bahay na bato sa baba, kahoy sa taas. Wala siyang ventanilla, pero it's actually one of the bigger houses sa Calle Crisologo. The other house naman, yung nasa moonlight, under the moonlight, is the Philadelphia de Leon house, which was bought by Governor Evaristo Titong Singson eventually. Noong 1942, it was one of the few houses in Vigan that was razed by fire. No one really know kung aksidente yung fire na yon or dahil sa war. But yeah, it happened in 1942. And after it was rebuilt, it became the location of Facoma. Facoma would be your arts and crafts school back then. And nowadays, it's standing as an exhibition center that can be used by the public. Yung next house naman, itong colorful na house na to, it's the Funeraria Bakiran. It's actually two houses, kasama niya yung maliit na house sa katabi niya. So, it was formerly the house of the namesake ng Calle Crisologo. Governor Mena Crisologo actually owned this house before. And then it was purchased by the Bakiran family, yung family ng Vice Mayor ng Vigan ngayon, who actually made a fortune sa pagpaparlor ng patay bilang isang funeraria. So dito ko narinig noon yung kayang ladies. So hindi ko nabasa yung kanyang pangalan na Funeraria Bakiran, basta pinasok ko na lang, and then there I saw 5 ladies or 3 ladies, if I'm not mistaken, na umiiyak at naka-uniform sila ng puti. And then the next one is also owned by the Bakiran nowadays. It's a 3-story building. It's actually the highest building in Calle Crisologo. In fact, it's the only building na 3-story tall sa Calle Crisologo historically. It's abandoned. No one is using it right now. But according to my friend, yung anak ni Mayor Eva dati, yung anak ni dating Mayor Eva, sorry for that, dati din siyang ginawang school nung American period. So it's currently being renovated by the government kasi recently na-acquire na rin nila. So we're all excited to see what will happen sa bahay na to. As you can see, ang rami niyang doors. So it's suggestive to the fact na meron siyang mga porch noon, mga voladas and protrusions. Ito naman, yung bahay na una, yung colored pink, is the Bartolome House, which was bought by Carmeling Crisologo din. Carmeling Crisologo also was a local politician of Ilocos Sur. And nowadays, it's housing the only hotel of Calle Crisologo, which is the Cordillera Inn. Yung kung nakikita natin may parang tore yung bahay, those were just recently added na lang. So merong building code yung Vigan that no houses should be taller than the bell tower of Vigan. And as much as possible, kung ano yung normal height ng houses, dapat ganun pa rin. But the addition was actually made before those rules took effect. So kumbaga exemption po siya. The next one is the Donato House. The Donato House, as you can see, is still unpainted. Marami pa ring parts na hindi pa nare-replaster. And replastering old buildings is one of the priorities ng Vigan. Kasi pag natatanggal yung plaster, you expose the brick more to weathering, and brick is a fragile material. It's very porous, madali siyang carve out. So it's one of the things that more and more houses are doing, which is to cover up the remaining exposed bricks. So yung Donato House naman houses yung Royal Bakery ng Vigan. So it has been a bakery ever since the American period, and it's nice that it's still a bakery until today. So as you can see, yung bahay na to meron siyang ventanilla. Pero yung mga kapis, yung mga iba medyo sira-sira na. But I have also a guess kung bakit sira-sira tong mga to. Kasi ako, lumaki din ako sa isang bahay na luma, kung saan kapis yung taas namin. And as kids, I don't know why we found it so fascinating to poke at kapis shells noon. Ginaganyan-ganyan. I guess maganda yung tunog na nagka-crack siya. So I would assume that that's also what happens sa Donato House. Yung mga bata, pinopoke siya. Kasi kung titignan mo yung upper part ng kapis windows, buo naman. Pero sa baba, it's marami nang natanggal. So it's a story of the place. It's a story of the locals. It's a story of the people of Vigan. So Calle Crisologo is not only a gift to the Filipino, but it is actually a gift to the world by our ancestors, or at least the ancestors of those people living in Vigan. So as I said a while ago, Vigan may not be unique back then, but it is unique now. And that is because people took care of the city, people took care of it with the passing of time. People did not forget their traditions. People have revived the spirit of the place and are trying their best effort to build on the on the ruins of Vigan, the glorious past that it once enjoyed. So Calle Crisologo is an important exponent to one of the more meaningful World Heritage sites in the world, and that is Vigan. So with that po, I end my presentation, and I hope you got a thing or two out of it.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Guerrero, for the wonderful talk. Grabe, Vigan is really such a place that's so full of history, culture, and traditions. Such a beautiful place. Okay, so right now, we will open this space for a short Q&A portion. So
Sure thing po.
you may send your questions through the Zoom chat, or you can raise your hand so that I can unmute you. Sir Bernard, may I ask you to remove your share screen po?
I sige po. Stop share. Okay.
We
There
actually
you go.
have one question po sa Zoom chat. Okay, so
Sure thing.
first question. Hello, what measures does Calle Crisologo have to protect the town and the tourists from natural disasters like typhoons and earthquakes as a historical street? Is there anything that they do differently?
If I'll just step out, may kukunin lang akong aklat. I think that's highly relevant sa question na yun. Sandali lang. So yes, Vigan as a heritage district and as a World Heritage Site is actually bound to follow a lot of stringent regulations as to how to maintain not only the aesthetic beauty of the place but also the integrity and authenticity of the place. Early in 2000, they actually came up with this book. In fact, there it's Vigan, and it's the manual. It's the Heritage Homeowners Preservation Manual. So this is basically the guide, the Bible of many of the locals and many of the stakeholders in Vigan as to how they would preserve it. So it actually details kung paano ba dapat yung pag-ayos ng mga bahay, ano ba dapat yung mga allowed na materials. As I said a while ago, even the color palette used in repainting the houses in Vigan are highly selected. It's only a few. You cannot paint it red, you cannot paint it bright yellow, but it has to be in very Victorian pastel color shades. Another thing that they're trying to do now is that they actually came up with the Vigan Conservation Center. It's actually in the outlying areas of Vigan, wherein it's supposed to be the repository of materials that can be used to fix vegan houses. So they want to make it sustainable. They want to make it local. Na kung mag-aayos ka ng mga bahay, hindi ka na kailangan bumili pa sa ibang probinsya. It's dun na lang. Is that recycle sira-sirang mga bintana, ginagawa nila ulit. So when the time comes that a house needs to be repaired, you can just get it from the conservation center. So at least in terms of materials used, when it comes to the technique used, medyo in compliance siya talaga with proper measures on authenticity and integrity. So vegan is actually quite strict when it comes to preservation, and that's also in response to damages caused by the bagyo. Kung nasira ang bintana mo, then that's the center that you would have to go to. So, but it's also nice to know that one of the reasons kung bakit siya tinawag na best managed city is because Vigan in reality is not really getting enough funding from the national government. In fact, it's not getting any funding there at all. So the Vigan that you see today is a local effort by the local government and the homeowners themselves. And that's what makes it nice. Kasi it's organic, and grassroots yung approach. It's bottom up instead of top bottom. Kasi kung titignan natin, for example, like China, ang kanilang conservation practice is top bottom, na talagang it's all instituted by the government. Yung mga locals na lang yung mag-apply. Dito naman, it's instituted by the locals and also enacted by the locals themselves. So it's true that vegan the whole of Ilocos Norte and Ilocos Sur is actually in the main pathway ng mga bagyos. So before the changes brought about by climate change happened, na yung mga bagyo ngayon is prating pupunta na sa south, halos noon lumaki ako na kami talaga yung exit route. So as I said a while ago, one of the bigger threats din ng vegan would be typhoon. And again, we cannot escape the typhoons, but at least what we can do is to control what can be done afterwards when we want to fix it. Nowadays, structurally, ang ginagawa na rin nila pag re-revive sila ng mga bahay ng vegan is that they put bracing na rin just to reinforce the structure. So in cases na may earthquake or in cases na may malalakas na hangin, hindi siya basta-basta magigiba.
Okay, thank you, sir. So due to time constraints, we have room for only 2 more questions. Okay, so next, may I call Dr. Labor?
There, I just unmuted myself. So yes, I wanted to speak to comment right away after Mr. Guerrero's talk, to thank him for the wonderful lecture, and I wanted to say that there were a number of points which were brought up in the lecture, but one which I found most interesting, which I wanted to relate to how he ended the lecture, was his reference to Calle San Nicolas, to San Nicolas, as what he said was even more splendid, than Calle Crisologo at one point, and then precisely you could see, and that's how he also ended the lecture, that you said that the importance of how the importance of how people take care of the place, and this is something which precisely we applaud everyone from Vigan, and of course all the cultural heritage workers who helped Vigan be as what it is now, to have done. So anyway, so that I found really very interesting, that the importance of continuous heritage work, is something that really just have to be sustained, very stark in comparison, ng Calle Crisologo sa San Nicolas, sa Manila. But anyway, although it was already brought up in your response to the first question, I also wanted to ask you something in relation to what was said earlier, that the reason why the center of the church governance was transferred from Cagayan to Vigan, to Vigan precisely has to do with the fact that flooding, was something which took place in Cagayan several in the past, I mean since then, and then of course it's something which we are confronting right now. Ang tanong ko lang, of course typhoon pass, as you just said a while ago, the typhoon dinadaanan din ang Ilocos, but does it also flood badly there? If not, then fantastic, I mean, if it's something that's really always that you can always be in control of, but does it? But if ever it does flood, like how do the people respond to it? That's my question. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I have experienced flooding in Vigan myself firsthand. And sa totoo lang, halos wala din akong naririnig na nag-flood talaga sa Vigan. I think it's because of the flank by two minsan hindi ko na nga sila matawag na rivers kasi yung mga yung for example the Mestizo River has drained down, pero yung river bed niya is malawak pa rin. So I think that most of the rainwater would easily go down there and automatically exits the South China Sea. So kumbaga hindi na i-stack po yung tubig doon. So even pag heavy yung rainwater, the most that can happen really is tataas lang yung tubig sa rivers, pero it doesn't come to a point na talagang nababasa yung Vigan Center.
So it is really blessed, no? Geographically, no? You have the settings.
Yes, ma'am.
At the same time,
Yes, ma'am.
we said earlier, what really saved it is the love affair. No?
Yes.
Affair, no? So parang stark contrast, no? Yung parang na-imagine ko parang we can write a story about love and war, no? And what happened with Vigan and in contrast to Manila, no? So definitely there was no love affair which happened in Manila, no? Which was really bombed heavily, no? During the time.
Right, ma'am.
Ang galing. Paano visualize yung contrast?
If I may also add po. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
If I may also add, ma'am, I think that when they redid the Calle Crisologo, when they put the cobblestones, I think that they had a foresight with potential flooding then. So ang ginawa po nila is that they made sure that proper drainage are also installed, at least on that particular street. And I would assume that when they were cobbling the other streets, they also bore that in mind, that proper drainage should be put in place in anticipation for possible flooding in the near future.
That's true. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So we have time for one last question. Charisse, meron pa ba?
Yes po, we actually have one from John Paul Abellera. He says, wonderful lecture, Bernard. How does Vigan plan to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic? This is for the locals and for the tourists.
Right. I think Region 1 as a whole has been lucky because we're one of the first few regions na ina-attempt na magbukas sa tourism, sa totoo lang. We started opening our gates again back in November 5, if I'm not mistaken. We have some tour guides dito and they can correct me if I'm wrong with the dates. So Ilocos Norte is opened up again for Luzon, and I think Ilocos Sur is opened up for Luzon as well. But I think that I don't know if you will agree with me on this one. Any effort towards reviving tourism at the moment is totally futile. And I'm speaking as a tourism consultant then. So it has been more than a month since, it has been practically been a month since we opened tourism, and largely we haven't seen any good influx yet of people interested coming into the Region 1 again. I guess largely it's because of the strict measures put in place. That even if people are allowed to get in, yung proseso na pagdadaanan nila is medyo mahirap pa rin. Like kailangan nilang magpa-test every 4 days, kailangan nilang gastusan yung whole trip nila, and it's definitely a hard time, and it's also definitely hard for tourism as well. But I'd like to think that, as I said a while ago, many locals miss the time when Vigan was less crowded. So I think that this pandemic also brought about a breathing space, a breathing time for locals to recover and for locals to enjoy what they should be enjoying. And that is that they get to be acquainted, or they get to be reconnected with the Calle Crisologo that they were used to. So sabi nga ng pinsan ko na nasa Vigan ngayon, Calle Crisologo is pretty much like any town nowadays. Walang mga souvenir shops na bukas, konti lang yung mga restaurants na bukas, at yung mga tao pwede na naman silang umupo daw sa labas. Pwede na naman silang maglabas ng kanilang mga silya at umupo lang sa Calle Crisologo whenever they want to. Pwede rin sila mag-siesta sa labas, which is something that before they cannot do. So from a cultural perspective, I think that's also nice kasi nakikita mo yung local flavors and local colors of Vigan playing in again. But for tourism, again, as I said a while ago, I think there's really not much that we can do. But at the moment, ang ginagawa ng local tourism agencies natin is capacity building. Something that not only Vigan but even some other towns in Region 1 are doing. So what they're doing is that they're actually conducting a lot of workshops, a lot of training, a lot of dialogues to better their services, to better their capacities, and to better their knowledge and skill sets, so that when the time comes that tourism is back into action again, they would be able to give a different experience to the tourists once they come to Vigan. Narinig ko nga na may isang bahay, I think that's the Florentino house. Narinig ko na inaayos na daw nila para maging restaurant. I mean, no one knows when the pandemic will end, but I'm sure at one point it will end. And when the time comes, at least we will see Vigan as if as if nothing happened. Kumbaga, maybe even much better. Kasi kumbaga yung wear and tear ng cityhood ngayon medyo mababa. Not many people are going through it. Not many people are in it. So and again, that's also the reason why Vigan was well preserved. No one was paying attention to the old city back then. So kumbaga, since it wasn't enjoying so much attention, it was able to be frozen in time. So more or less, I guess within a year span, maybe that's also something that will aid in the preservation of Vigan 2, yung break niyang 1 year na ito so far. So ayun, how does it cope? I guess as with any other place, like in Manila, I've been seeing some promotions. I've been seeing my friend Ivan Mandi trying to pump up tourism activities on his own end, but it's just that there's just so much that we can do.
Okay, thank you so much po. And I would like also to thank everyone for actively participating in today's webinar session. So I hope everyone learned a thing or two from today's discussion because I'm sure that I did. So before our event ends, we would like to, of course, show our appreciation for today's guest. But before we present the certificate of appreciation, we would like to say that we are giving the certificate along with a small token of appreciation, which we shall be sending through delivery to Mr. Guerrero. Okay, so I will just share screen. Okay, so now I will present the certificate. So the citation reads, Project Faura Incorporated with the BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage, and Arts Management Program, Department of Arts and Communication, College of Arts and Sciences, University of the Philippines, Manila, presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Bernard Guerrero for speaking on Calle Crisologo, Myths and Narratives of the Street, given this 24th day of November 2020 during the UP Manila PhilArts webinar, signed by Dr. Levy Achanzar-Labor, convener of PhilArts webinar series and executive director of the Faura Project Incorporated, and also signed by Professor Ali Sadeva, chair of the Department of Arts and Communication, College of Arts and Sciences of the University of the Philippines, Manila.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again, Mr. Guerrero, for sharing your valuable insight on Calle Crisologo to us. So to close our event, let's again hear from the webinar convener, Dr. Levy Achanzar-Labor.
Okay, once again, thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. And of course, all of you who got to participate this day's webinar. It has been a wonderful our first two series have been a wonderful start for this continuing seminar, and of course, since this is the second or the last, for the year, for this semester, we are really glad to have a topic which has been declared as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Of course, as indicated by Mr. Guerrero earlier, it has to do with Vigan as a whole, not just for the street of Calle Crisologo. But of course, Calle Crisologo is something which is the focus of this today's webinar, and despite the fact that we acknowledge that the entirety of Vigan is what has been declared as a heritage site, we know that Calle Crisologo really stands out, and does speak of what is most beautiful of Vigan as a whole. So, and we look forward to having you with us once again next semester, next year, and for more heritage talks which would highlight the value of streets in each locality. Okay, so Charisse.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So right now, let's take a picture to commemorate today's webinar session. So everyone, please turn on your cameras if you're able to. Um, I think Sue accidentally left.
Who our speaker?
Yeah. Baka internet problems.
Uh,
Sige po. Let's still take the picture now po. We could just edit him in, I guess. Okay, everyone, smile. 1, 2, 3. Oh wait, Sir's here. Sir, may I request you to turn on your camera so that we can take a picture? There. Okay. Okay. Okay, everyone. Wait. Um. Okay, smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much po. Okay, so last na talaga, lastly, please answer this evaluation form that we prepared so that we know how to serve you better in terms of making the PhilArts webinar series the best that it can be. So please note that only the people who answer this evaluation form can request for a certificate of attendance for today's webinar session. Okay, so you can just take a picture and I'll also be sending the link. You can access the evaluation form through that QR code. After answering, you may leave the Zoom meeting room. Thank you. I've also sent the link in the chat. Again, if you're done answering the evaluation form, you may leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you.
right. So before I lose my connection, so thanks Bernard. Thank you once again, and thanks
Thank you again.
Charisse.
Sure po.
Yeah.